When I tell friends of mine that I have a friend of the family that I've known for 60 plus years, they're pretty favorably impressed. And then when I tell them that this friend is 101 years old, they're startled. And that's the case with Don Staebler. Don is, as I said, a real patriarch of this community. His farm is out on Plymouth Road, right near Dixboro, not too far from Dixboro. To set the stage, give us a little potpourri of your family and its history at this farm.
Well, the Staebler family moved to this area in the spring of 1912. I was a year and a half old. We moved up here with Mother driving the one-horse buggy with us 3 kids in it, Dad driving the team with a wagon and all our worldly possessions in it, and friends and relatives driving what livestock we had. We had, as I remember, a maximum of 10 head of cattle, which we put in the barn on the farm.
Did you ever think you would live to be 101?
Of course not. Really, you never gave it any thought.
Right.
You never gave it any thought. You just kept going, that's all, as long as you felt like it.
Well, when you got to 90, did you kind of think to yourself, gosh, maybe I could get there?
Well, I was getting a little tired by that time. And there was always the possibility of selling the farm for a subdivision.
At this point, I'm going to invite Tom Freeman to come in, and Tom and you can have this conversation much better than I would be able to engage in it.
Well, Don, I just thought it'd be a nice thing to talk about how Staebler Farm became a property that now it belongs to the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission, but still is a farm that you live on and continue to enjoy, and the community continues to enjoy.
I wanted to save the farm after all the farmers around here had gone. First one was a Schrader farm up here that disappeared. The Freeman farm disappeared. And I didn't like it. I thought more of this farm than just the money that would be involved in selling it to a realtor. So we just held off on it, and until I forget who told me that the county might be interested. But he came out to talk about it, and we discussed what might be going on and all that stuff. Didn't take very long. We didn't hold off very long. The price was very good, not nearly as much as a developer would pay, but the prospect of keeping the farm from being covered up with houses was very, very intriguing. The county decided to hire somebody to repair it. A timber frame barn with hand-hewn timbers, mortise and tenon joints with wooden pegs, a beautiful restoration. The rest of the buildings did not need much. They were in good condition. They needed replacement of boards, and of course they all needed and got it, new roofs.
This is a graphic that was done to document the farm buildings. Not only the original barn that Don has talked about so much, but all the other outbuildings that were associated with it. Don mentioned how nicely the restoration came out. We took advantage of that good work, applied to the state, and received an award recognizing the restoration that was done on the loafing barn, and received an award from the Michigan Historic Barn Preservation Network. So it's been just over 10 years now, closing in on 11 years. We talk about how we're going to make the property more available to the public in the future, but that's still something that's in the future. If we're able to look at the map right now, we're sitting in the farmhouse right here right now. The barns that we've been talking about are right here on the other side of Plymouth Road, which bisects the property. And over here is a large pond called Peaceful Pond, Now, Don, was that pond there, or was that created?
Oh no, that was done at the time the freeway was built.
So that's where they borrowed
for gravel. They took out about 140,000 yards of gravel out of there to build a roadbed for the freeway. But we were very happy with that.
You know, you can see on the aerial map here that the property does actually have frontage on both Murray Lake and Frains Lake. It's an area that's got wet soils, and in fact, there is a wonderful stand of tamarack, some people call larch. We've talked about for years the ability of you to stay on the property and to enjoy it and to continue the history here.
Many people, of course, won't believe I'm that old, but maybe I don't either as far as that goes. This certificate of baptism was taken at the old Zion Lutheran Church in Ann Arbor in 1911. I was not even a year old at that time. Mother always did a lot of home canning, so she needed a lot of sugar, and it was very hard to get. I remember the day my dad came home from Ypsilanti and hauled out a 100-pound bag of sugar, grinning from ear to ear. How in the world did you get that? Oh, I knew a guy in the grocery store. And he gave him 100 pounds of sugar. Well, Mother was overjoyed, of course, that she had it. How much did you pay for that? $40. That was a year's salary. How did you stand that? Oh, I had the money. I bought it, that's all. That's the way it was. We heard that there was something going on. There was nothing. There was no communication except by telephone. We had a wall-hung telephone. There's a copy of it on the wall out there now. There were as many as 14 subscribers on the line. Word spread by telephone. If there was anything of great importance and even an emergency in the neighborhood, Central, who was the switchboard operator in Ann Arbor, gave one long ring on the telephone. Everybody knew, find out what was going on. This was emergency. That's how we heard that the war was over with. So we got all piled into the 1917 Maxwell and went to Ann Arbor to see what was going on. I remember parking on Ashley Street and seeing car after car with towing tin cans or wash tubs or anything that would make a racket running all over town to celebrate the war was over with. We always went to Ypsilanti for everything. We didn't go to Ann Arbor because it was not a good road. And when we went to high school, of course, Plymouth Road was not yet built, and so we all took the easy route that everybody went to Ypsilanti. I took woodworking shop all 4 years of my high school, and that's why I decided I should teach it. If you ever look through the house, I have several pieces of furniture that I made in high school. The road, of course, was never plowed out. In the spring, there were no snow plows by the county or anything like that at that time. We just took along a shovel. And there were times when we shoveled our way through snowdrift to get to school, yes. Eastern Michigan, which was Michigan State Normal College at that time, was handy, and all the kids, younger kids, were still going to Ypsilanti High, so we'll just, why not drive on up there and go to school? The only logical thing was to take industrial art. So I went 3 years there. Director of the department came around one day and said, I think I have a job for you right now. I think you better take it. It's only for 1 year, and then you will have to agree to come back and get your degree. The instructor was going back to college to get his degree, and he would be back the following year, so it was arranged. One year was all he will teach. I was pretty green, I'll tell you, but we got along all right. I came back and finished up my degree, and that instructor quit, and I got the job back again. And I worked there for the next 9 years. I met Lena in September of 1929. Glenn Freeman got me off in the corner one day and said, "Carol has a girl she would like you to meet." What's it all about? Well, I tell you, we're having a hot dog roast down back of the Parker Mill. It was a rather popular place for that sort of thing. Carol has a girl that she wants you to meet. Well, I don't know about that. She brought her over and introduced us, and we had a few words, and they walked away, and then Carol came back and said, "Come on, Don, be a good sport. Invite her to go with you." All right. So I said, "Would you care to ride in a Chevrolet down there?" "Oh, sure, I'd love to do that." We took her down. We had a wonderful time at the weenie roast. And I remember I took Lena back to Carol's home. And she said, the first thing when she got in the house, "Did he ask you for another date?" "Ooh." And Lena said, "Well, yes, he did. He asked me to go to a dance over at the Gleaner Hall north of Ann Arbor next week." I came home in the spring of '42, and I made application for a school at Willow Run teaching Army cadets maintenance on the B-24. I was hired on the spot and started work the next day. I went to England too after that to do the same thing, but that school only lasted about 6 months because the Japanese surrendered. The war was over. There was no need anymore for that kind of work. So I came back to the farm. I entered a partnership with my dad. He passed away in 1951, and I bought the farm at that time. My wife and I operated it as a dairy farm for the next 10 years. We milked as many as 35 cows. 1961, I was offered a job with the Eaton Corporation in the Research Center in Southfield. We sold the dairy cows, kept a few beef cows, and I attempted to handle both jobs, which I guess worked out all right. I worked for them until mandatory retirement at 65. Came back to the farm. Now we are going to tour the barns. The highway, of course, back in the old days was a dirt track. The well house is one of the original buildings. It has been moved once because when the highway department paved the road, they took another 100-foot right of way, so we had to move some buildings, including this one. This barn is probably the oldest one on the farm. It was made up of hand-hewn timbers, fastened together with wooden pegs and all that sort of thing. When we moved here, it had stanchions for 10 cows along one side. On this side were 2 or 3 box stalls for other animals. That barn was built by 3 local carpenters. My dad had them start working in the early spring, and they had to be done by the time it was time to put hay in the barn in June. They did it. They tore down an old barn, which stood where that is, cleaned up all the stuff, and built this one by the middle of June. No power equipment, none. No power saws, no power nailers, nothing. Everything was done by hand. The farm had a cash crop of usually wheat. All the rest of the land was taken up by crops for cattle feed. I at one time during the last 20 years or so had as many as 60 head of cattle out here. Cows stood here. This was the gutter behind them. The mangers that you see down there were all the way along here. Now, we had, sometimes Burma shave was a pretty popular sign, as some people may remember, all over the United States. A single sign, and then 100 feet down was another one. All of them put together made some kind of a rhyme or something like that. I have a couple of them left, is all I have. Here's the way we heated the soldering coppers for soldering. This is a gasoline blowtorch. This is my original jigsaw. Here's what's known as a ship sauger, used, I presume, for, according to what the name was. We used it here to probably bore holes to put the wooden pegs in. The kid's job in the morning, early every day, was to turn the crank while Dad sharpened his mower knives so he could go out and cut hay. That's a corn sheller used for shelling the kernels off the cob. This is household equipment for the bathroom. Here's the water pitcher that the maid brought in with warm water. This they called a thunder mug. You can see what it's used for, stored underneath the bed. These are the pitchers and wash bowl that was in the bedroom of every home. The silo is not original. There was a wooden stave silo there before we changed over to concrete. Well, that's one that I converted from a walk-behind garden tractor. I got tired of walking behind it, so I fixed it so I could ride on it. It's a seed cleaner. Back in the days before there was certified seed to plant on the farm, the farmer saved the best of his previous crop to plant. That was my mother's washing machine. Her first one, I remember, was a lot different from that, had a wooden tub. This is probably maybe the third that she had. We had our own electric system in 1920. It was a battery-powered, direct current, 32 volts, and a whole bunch of batteries that sat in a little room outside, and a gasoline-powered generator to keep the batteries charged. 110 volt was not available, so you used that one, which was 32 volt DC. We didn't get electrical power from Detroit Edison until 1929. Then all that was thrown out and changed over to 110. Now called 115. But it was actually 110 in those days. Then we got lights in the barn, and eventually we got milking machines, water pumps and all that stuff, and washing machine with a motor on it and all that kind of stuff. I used to make ship models, maybe one of the first I ever made. Oh, 1920 maybe. This is the milk room. This is where we cooled the milk for a period of about 10 years during the 30s. My dad didn't think he was getting enough money for his milk at the creamery in Detroit, so he decided to sell milk at home. We did that for about 10 years. People would come with their jugs and we'd fill them for them. And we also separated milk and cream and sold whipping cream. We sold whipping cream for 50 cents a quart. We sold fluid milk for 20 cents a gallon. But we made a living for about 10 years that way. This is a milk cart that we use for transporting milk cans. It'll hold 4. Open the valve, let the milk flow into here. Inside there is a very high-speed series of plates. The milk, as it runs down in there, is thrown by centrifugal force to the outside. Cream being heavier comes out the outside, skim milk in the center comes out the other. This steam, this spoon, or that one. It's a hog house where we kept the hogs, fed them. Not very many, but a few. The other is the corn crib where we stored the ear corn, and the fact that the spacing between the slats is for drying the corn, let air through it. Because when you picked the corn, it was slightly damp, so you had to put it in there and let it dry or it wouldn't keep. This is the horse barn over here, former horse barn. There were stalls for 5 horses in here. You can see there were stalls this wide. This is original, and there was one there, one in there, and one down there. So it held 5. Converted now to stanchions to hold cows. These are the old-fashioned cow stanchions. The cow comes in, puts her head in there. We slap this over and drop that down. She's locked in. She can't get out. She can lie down, stand up, whichever she wishes. Very comfortable, but she can't get away. Kids on the farm learned a lot of things, of course, and they did a lot of work. We expected the kids to go to the barn to help milk as soon as they were 10 years old. Milking by hand, of course. So we all learned when we got to be 10 years, you went to the barn and helped. And of course, in between, you helped feed the cattle if you not lifting bales or anything like that, but feeding them grain, perhaps. And you could sweep the floors, you could do this, all that sort of thing we could do. Anything we could do, we did, yeah. We hoed weeds out of the garden. Sometimes we went out in the cornfield and hoed weeds out of the corn row. The more weeds you get rid of, the more corn you have. Learned quite young to put the harness on a horse too, and get the horses out of the barn, maybe hitch them up. Maybe you drove them on something. You might use a drag harrow on the plowed ground, and you walked, that's all, you walked. These 2 are original. They were about 8 inches in diameter in 1910. And there are 3 others back of the house that are original. The porch is not original. It was built in 1920. Those gambrel sticks, as they're called, are what they hoisted the hog up and held it up while they cleaned it and took the hair off and all that stuff. I was hanging some up there, and I said, my gosh, that looks like an eyebrow over that. The dinner bell in the old days was also an alarm system. If you heard a dinner bell ringing continuously in a time that was not lunchtime, you would know there was an emergency. You'd hitch up the horse and to the buggy and head for the sound. A fire, medical emergency or something like that. All the neighbors would converge, of course. That shop building takes the place of an old woodshed that we had. Of course, wood was very important. We fill the woodshed in the fall. We burned it in the kitchen stove and in the furnace for a long time. Took down the woodshed. I built that shop in 1946, I think. It has my workshop in it, the car is in there, and the other end was used for firewood. That's chicken house. Mother always had a flock of chickens. She sometimes hatched her own, sometimes she bought them. But she always had a flock of 40 or 50 chickens that she sold the eggs from, and when the hens no longer laid eggs, she'd sell them for meat. Her shed, this is where we kept all the farm machinery. That was built at the same time the barn was built, the big barn. There was an old house that sat there when we moved here that had been converted into a buggy shed. And we believe that that house came off this foundation because the basement in that doesn't fit the house at all. So we think this house was on that, moved over here, and the new house built on it. 1948, I constructed an apartment upstairs. That's why the outside stairway. My wife and I lived up there. My parents lived downstairs until my father died. I bought the farm and we moved downstairs. The upstairs has been rented out since then. The pump is the original cistern pump. Underneath the back porch is a cistern that's kept full by water runoff from the roof of the house. So this pump was the only running water that we had in the house for many, many years. That was sat next to an old cast iron sink in the kitchen. Mother liked it because it was soft water. The home workshop, mostly woodworking machinery, but not necessarily so. Used to do all my own repair work, including my cars. There's a pit underneath that car. Grease my own cars and change the oil and all that stuff. The lathe, you can't see much of it from there. Drill press, of course. It's a radial arm saw back here. I used to make a lot of furniture. I have several pieces in the house. We used that trailer, built in 1937. We traveled as far west as Colorado, and we spent a lot of time down in the mountains in Tennessee and Kentucky. The first cooking facilities we had in that trailer were made from a gas stove that I bought at a junkyard. Studio couch went across the back. Of course, it unfolded into a bed. We had a copy of a Popular Science magazine, and that was the year that I won 2 prizes from Popular Science magazine for innovations on the house trailer which I built. One of them was for the axle that I built. Couldn't afford to buy one, so I had built. I made brakes for it from a 1937 Plymouth that I put on that and reworked it so it worked fine, and I won a prize on that one too. Lena's job on the trip was to record all the purchases of gasoline, all the purchases of food and everything that we had, the mileage where we traveled every day so that we knew exactly where we had been and how far it was. And we did that all the way up until 1967. Yeah. Oh, yeah.